Can I tell about the dream that I had the other night?
Sure, go ahead and tell me about this dream that you had.
So, I was looking for a pirate ship, and I saw this small, old white tent at one end. It was blue, and it had white lights hanging all around it.
So, what you're telling me is you've had some rather potent alcohol lately. Is that what you've been meaning to tell me?
Welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on all sides of planet Earth. And the way that we measure that is we go to Ukraine, we travel to Uganda, but ladies and gentlemen, we take the long way around. This podcast is called Hey, Listen to This, and it is hosted by two dashingly good-looking men who share the same middle name. I am the one. I am the only. I am the one who's definitely a man, but don't call me Dan Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, the only, I'm not sure if it was Tom Holland or Tobey Maguire that played my favorite Spiderland and Spider-Man, Matthew James Durzick. And for those of you who are wondering what this show is all about, it's pretty much right there in the title. Hey, listen to this. Each week, me and Ryan talk about an album that we have chosen, a music album, and we go over it track by track, note by note, lyric by lyric, decide what we like, what we don't like, what we think is the best, what we think sucks, if anything does suck, or if anything is good for that matter. And we just flesh it out as far as our thoughts on each album and each track of each album. And Ryan, what did we do last week in that regard?
Last week, we took our first trip into Motown with the collaboration album from Diana Ross and the Supremes, and they were joining them Temptations. And yeah, for me, the experience reviewing that album was pretty good. I mean, like, it was a bit surprising considering a couple of the notable tracks off of that LP. Well, one specifically, you and I agreed on was, not what we expected in performance. But overall, though, I'm, like, with most of our reviews, I'm walking away from the review feeling pretty, satisfied and happy that we, took the time to review such an album and, got into that genre and style of music, that era of music, because, you were able to pick up from my 30 days song social media challenge that I recently concluded. By the way, I wasn't really that much of a Motown fan, but I knew the big songs. But I'm always happy to put an album underneath my belt.
And I'm glad to help you put that album underneath your belt because I've always loved Motown music, and this was a nice way to get to experience that with someone's fresh ears. I could have made that sound a little less creepy, but I stand by what I said. And if you'd like to check out that review for yourself, you may do so. It is available on all streaming platforms. More details about that later on in the show. But Ryan, it is now your turn to pick what we're going to be talking about. And we're going to be taking a trip down south, in a sense, from Detroit to Louisville, Kentucky. Please enlighten us with what we got this week in your latest installment of this mini-series you're working on.
So, the album that we're covering this week comes from the band Slint. And the album more specifically that we're covering from their discography, this is their second and final studio album, which, I didn't know that they only released 2 studio albums prior to, doing this review. But, that's fun. But, yeah, so the album more specifically that we're covering is Spiderland. That record was released in 1991. Now, specifically, the reasons why we're covering Slint, Spiderland, one of our first reviews that we ever did was Black Country New Roads for the first time. And now it's not the very first review we ever did, but it's very earlier on in our catalog. Now, for those of you who are curious about that review and what we thought about the record, you know what to do. Just scroll back in that podcasting app that you're currently listening to us on right now. Or maybe even just sort by oldest episodes to newest, and you'll be able to find it maybe a hair quicker. But they referenced, they by being Black Country New Road, they referenced this band here, Slint, in that record. And also, like, I knew this album, Spiderland, was, like, very, very influential in, like, the post-rock and, like, indie rock scene. And it got released in 1991, a very pivotal year for music. I mean, you get albums like Loveless by My Bloody Valentine dropping. Later on in that year, you get Nirvana basically blowing the musical landscape out of the water with Nevermind. So yeah, it was a very impactful year for music. Now, for those of you who are wondering, whoa, Ryan. What is a slint? And where did they come from? Well, that is an absolutely fair question. And, dear listener, I'm here to enlighten you. So, like Matt alluded to, Slint emerged from Louisville, Kentucky. They formed in 1986, and the band was built on deep creative roots. It was the two founding members primarily were lifelong friends Brian McMahon and Britt Walford, and those guys were veterans of a punk group called Squirrel Bait. It's a fun punk rock name right there. And so those two gentlemen joined forces with guitarist David Pajo, and David was a previous member of the band Maurice, and like apparently McMahon and Walford were also briefly featured in that band as well. So those three, alongside bassist Ethan Buckler, they started to form what Slint was in terms of like crafting a sound that was like a little bit more obtuse and dynamic than like a lot of what people would consider to be like traditional punk rock, especially in the late 80s, because you could think about it, bands like Dead Kennedys, X, Bad Religion. Like, think about like if you Google like 1980s punk rock and the sound that you can hear from that, the sound you hear from Slint, from their first album Tweez, and also like the album that we're talking about today, Spiderland. I mean, it's a little bit different. So speaking about their debut album, it was released in 1987. One Steve Albini released that record with them, recorded that record with them. So, and yeah, I mean, that record barely saw a release because there's a whole bunch of like drama behind of like the recording process and the release process that I'm not going to really get into with this episode because it doesn't really impact Spiderland. But yeah, so after they had to switch over in bass, which Ethan Buckler left the group and Todd Brashear joined the group, the band's focus shifted. And around that time, they signed with Touch and Go Records and developed a new painstaking songwriting method. And when we're going to talk about painstaking, like, we're going to flush that out within the 6 tracks that we're going to be talking about here today. So, yeah, and at this time, like, the band was going off to college, but, like, during college breaks, they would lock themselves away, slowly constructing songs piece by piece, over repeating guitar figures, allowing tension and texture to build organically. So that kind of sets the ground here a little bit for what the band, like how they emerged and how they formed, how their debut album was released and who recorded it. Now, setting the scene here a little bit more, specifically with Spiderland. So, as they prepare to record Spiderland, two key events happen that properly set the stage for this album. First, they chose producer Brian Paulson to help them achieve a clearer, more spacious sound. And second, and I think more importantly, a severe car accident nearly killed Brian McMahon. And he then struggled with depression, and his brush with mortality infused with the upcoming recording sessions with a palpable sense of dread and introspection that really provided the dark emotional core for what would become Spiderland. So yeah, a little bit like, it's ironic that, for the second review in a row that of albums that I've put up for contentions, we're talking about a depressing, dark record. But, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to report that Brian McMahon, did not go down the route of Ian Curtis. More on that later. But yeah, and I mean, I know that's just a brief blip on how Slint formed, their debut record, and really what set the stage for Spiderland as a whole. But for me, like, from what I understand, at the time, Slint wasn't really well received, and it wasn't until, like, after they broke up that they became a cult classic kind of band. Like, I don't know, like, the only thing I can equate it to off the top of my brain is, like, when Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was in theaters, it didn't do so well, but, like, afterward, it became a cult classic kind of film. So, and before I give any more details of my background with the band and what, made me choose this record, well, I think I covered that at the beginning. But before I dive into, like, any more details about the band from my own personal standpoint, I'm going to turn it over to you, Matt. What is your experience with the group?
So my experience with Slint is pretty much non-existent. I'm going to be straightforward and honest. This is one of those bands and albums that I've only heard a handful of musings about from rock publications and the occasional internet comments saying, oh, this would never get the due respect it deserves, ba-da-da-da-da. But I personally had not really taken the time to listen to this album. I mean, I am aware of Steve Albini, who produced their first album. We talked about him when we discussed Surfer Rosa by the Pixies. And by the way, the one little anecdote I did do research on, as far as what people said about this album, is that Steve Albini said in, I believe it was Melody Maker, which is a UK publication, that he would give this album 10 stars. And when I say 10 stars, I mean 10 bleeping stars. He literally put that in print. You could pretty much figure out what the bleeping means. But yeah, I really do not have a whole lot of experience, if any at all, with Slint heading into this review. So this is all fresh stuff for me.
And, like, for me, honestly, like, I'm kind of right there with you. Like, I knew about the group. I knew about the album being important. I knew the comparisons to Black Country New Road. I mean, we did the review for the first time, and, like, they're literally referenced within one of the songs in that album. And I also, like, I knew of the comparisons to one of my favorite groups of all time, Law Dispute, and how they're sometimes compared to Slint in terms of, like, drawing influence from them. More on that later. But yeah, I've never heard a single note from them. Never heard a single second out of any material that they've ever released. And also, fun fact, like, when we dive into the record, I'm going to be honest with you, I was not expecting this kind of a album. I was expecting, like, because, like, they advertised this record as being a highly influential record to post-rock, and I'm expecting, like, Godspeed You Black Emperor, or Explosions in the Sky, or Sigur Rós. No, dude.
Nope.
No.
Nope. And here's the thing. For as little as I know about the bands you just mentioned there too, even I could tell this is a different kind of animal that we are analyzing today for its musical endeavors. So, with that being said, I say we get right into it. We kick open the doors, dive into that pool, and join the lads of Splint as we take a trip to Spiderland, and that kicks off with the first track, which is Breadcrumb Trail. Ryan, if you are ready, the floor is yours.
Oh yeah, I am absolutely ready for better for worse. Maybe not for worse, because Breadcrumb Trail, it's such an interesting start to the record, man. Like for me, like the instant thing I gravitated towards was the spoken word aspect of it, with the very distorted and almost, it's not quite this, but it all, like the guitar riff that is heard throughout much of the song acts as much as of a drone, but it's not a drone. Like traditionally, like a drone is I mean, for those of you who have heard drone music before, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, this song here is absolutely hypnotic, and the way that the instant comparison that I thought of is La Dispute with their Here Here series. And for those of you who are not familiar with that series, like essentially it's their purely spoken word stuff. So right out of the gate, this is very much like driving up into my lane. I'm parking right in the parking lot. No, not even in the parking lot. I'm just bursting right through the gate, and really just enjoying what this album's bringing to the table, specifically with the song here. So the main thing I like about the song is how the song shifts between sections and how the lyrics amplify the shift. So in the very first section, you get the story about how the narrator was looking for a pirate ship, and you can get the sense of the narrator just approaching this fairy ground, or this mystical funland, or what have you. And as he gets closer, he approaches this fortune teller. Instead of being asked, the fortune teller asked if he wanted his fortune read, and he thought about it for a second, but then he asked the fortune teller if she would rather go on the roller coaster instead. That notion in its own right. I know I'm kind of skipping a little bit of a beat here with my lyrical analysis, but lyrics are going to play a heavy role into this LP. But the concept of refusing to get your fortune read and asking the fortune teller to go on a roller coaster instead, that's a direct metaphor for saying, you know what, I don't want to know what's going to happen in my life. I want to experience it as it happens. I want to experience the highs and lows. And from that moment, you get the shift where things get more distorted, more loud, more disorienting, and you get the lyrics creeping up into the sky, stopping at the top, and then staring down. So they're on the roller coaster at this point. So I love how the song was able, and the group was able to use the lyrical shift to amplify the tonal shift from the instruments. That was absolutely really a lot of fun for me. Now, outside of the shifts, I'm gonna be the first one to admit, the vocals aren't the best, but I honestly don't mind them so much. They aren't the worst vocals. I mean, we did a Bob Dylan review, and I know the Bob Dylan has a reputation for having not so good vocals. So vocals aren't always everything, but you know what? The vocals aren't, they don't deter me so much. But yeah, outside of the vocals and the shifts, just the guitar tones and the riffs throughout the whole song that attempt to ground the song are another highlight for me. And how the guitar part plays out near the end, after the lyrics, "Who told you you could leave?" That's a really solid moment, and I really dig the instrumentals that basically occur after that. And like I kind of hinted at a little bit with my lyrical analysis, is that this song here is basically a love story of a boy being a fortune teller at a carnival, and the two are riding a roller coaster during the climax of the song. So it's a fun notion. And another thing I want to highlight lyrically is like right smack dab in the middle, the section where you get to talk about, like, far below, a soiled man, a bucket of torn tickets at his side. He watches children run by and he cleans his teeth. Like, the contrast between the playfulness of the children and the ticket taker, who's has life experience and maybe is jaded by life, or just has experienced life where it's run him down and robbed him of that joy. Like, that's a noteworthy moment that I just want the listener to put a pin in, and we will revisit that notion of like childhood and adulthood at the very end of this review. But yeah, overall, Breadcrumb Trail was a very fun way for me to like experience, and like it's a very fun track to open up a whole LP. Again, not what I was expecting with this record, especially coming right out of the gate. But, I like it a good bit. Not a top track for me, and for a full disclosure, I know we only have 6 tracks here. I only have a top 3, I don't have a bottom anything.
So, full disclosure, before I start talking about Breadcrumb Trail, I also have a top 3 and a bottom nothing. So, we're seeing eye to eye in that regard. As far as Breadcrumb Trail, though, goes, first of all, that intro, I've heard this, well, maybe not heard, but I saw on several sites, one of them being Wikipedia, sorry, sue me, that this album was considered a math rock record, and I'm not 100% sure I buy that, but I will say that the intro to this track very much falls into that, even if in a primitive sense, it feels like a math rock tune, because the way that the band is riffing changes time signatures pretty much every 5 seconds. And it just creates, I know you called it a drone. The term I would use for that is hypnotic. Like, it just hypnotizes you into this, like, sort of rolling riff of unending nature. In fact, the very first note I have written down is, if Neil Young did math rock. Like, that's what this felt like in a sense. Just that guitar, that very basic but very strong, powerful guitar. And the way that soft groove contrasts with the loud wailing guitars on the chorus, those little pings of just raw energy in between the sung vocals, it's such a great contrast. And the lyrics, like you mentioned, it's funny how you consider them to be metaphorical, because I think you're right, but I did not see it that way the first time around. I'm still not sure if I want to see it that way. To me, this sounds like I took it a little bit more literally as this shy kid who's, staring at the ground, kicking his toes. He goes up to a fortune teller and says, "Hey, instead of me paying you to tell me my future, why don't you get out of your tent and, go join me?" Like, in a literal sense, it's actually pretty romantic. Like, it says, like, no, you're coming on my adventure. Like, you are joining me for this. And when he talks about that feeling of floating in the second part of the song, which is the sung section, like, again, I did not put 2 and 2 together of that being the roller coaster going up and down and up and down. I thought it was just him, being with this significant other of the moment and just having that feeling of floating away, feeling free from whatever it is that was bogging him down, if anything. So I thought that was really, really nice. And yeah, right out of the gate, I could absolutely see where Black Country New Road got their stuff, because I hear the tension in the lyrics. I hear the tension in the delivery. I will say, you're talking about the vocals. I don't know if you had the same issue I did, but for me, the issue with the vocals isn't the pitch or the delivery or the soft-spokenness. To me, the biggest problem with the vocals, not just on this song, but throughout the whole album, is the mixing. Like, I thought the vocals were mixed way too low. Like, I wanted them to be a little bit more front and center. I didn't think the performances were bad, but I did want to not be like, turning my volume up 10 additional notches, be like, what'd you say? The hell did you, what was that? Did you, what did you say there? But all that aside, I really did like this track a lot, so much so that we've arrived in my top 3, and we have arrived at the mountaintop of my top 3. We're kicking things off with my favorite song on the record.
Dude, oh man, I can absolutely respect that. A couple, things I want to, comment on is one, the vocal mixing that you were talking about. I'm interested to hear your thoughts, specifically with the vocal mixing with a couple of the tracks coming up here, because with how a couple of the moments found throughout the rest of the record, how the vocal mixing was utilized and how the recording was done, I thought was an absolute highlight for me, and I was just like, holy crap. Granted, my first, proper listen through of this record in terms of, a note-taking experience was through earbuds, and I was literally looking at the lyric sheet, so, I mean, I feel like that might be cheating, but I digress. And it's funny that you mentioned how Steve Albini basically said, this album, if he could give it, if he could rate it, he would rate it 10 bleeping stars. Because honestly, if I'm thinking about it right now, this is very much a Steve Albini sounding record. It's very clean. It's very cut dry. It very much reminds me of the recording quality of Surfer Rosa. So that was a fun note that I had in my brain. And yeah, outside of that, I mean, I'm glad that this was your favorite track coming off the record, and I mean, obviously it's not my favorite track, and I don't have any bottom tracks here, but yeah, I just see other tracks for one reason or another really just got me hooked. So yeah, man, I'm absolutely happy though that you you liked this track so much that it was your favorite track coming off the record. Because honestly, you can even ask my wife, whenever I was talking to her about this record, I'm like, oh, I don't know if Matt's gonna like it. I don't know if Matt's gonna like it. And I wanted to text you jokingly, be like, Matt, I'm sorry.
No, nothing to apologize for. We have started this album off on a good note with Breadcrumb Trail, and again with 6 tracks being in the fray here, it would be rather dangerous to screw one up, and so far they have not. So I am ready, if you are, Ryan, to pivot on over to the next track, which is Nosferatu Man.
Yeah, man. Talk to me about this track here.
Well, this track, Nosferatu Man, and I'm sorry, I can't hear the name Nosferatu without thinking about that SpongeBob reference. Nosferatu! But Nosferatu Man is basically a song that, well, basically with this band, come on. A song about how this guy is feeling a bit of a solidarity and a feeling of, wanting everything in his path. You could possibly see it as a sequel to the romance that was budding on Breadcrumb Trail, or you could see it as its own environment, its own story, whichever route you want to take. But the lyrics definitely try to parallel the brooding wanderlust and brooding wanton for everything that he sees that he wants to claim as his, in a similar way to Nosferatu from the book and the movie. And the groove on this track, once again, very menacing, very, it seems a bit more droll and a little less upbeat than Breadcrumb Trail was. Things are slowed down a little bit, and there isn't a lot of jumping between sections. There's a whole lot of shifting. It is a rather intricate riff again, but it's not one that jumps out and takes you on this aural journey. It's more or less just a straightforward riff that goes throughout. So the groove is a little lesser. I would also say the lyrics are a little lesser this time around too, because while I do understand the parallels that are being sought after here, I don't necessarily think it's as believable, because I do think that you could write a good song about, being king of the castle as this monster that, only desires love and will kill anything in its way to, get what he loves and what he desires. And I feel a song like that has to have a bit more of a, I don't know. It's hard for me to believe the singer in this song, only because the last song was so convincing in what it was trying to portray. Like, I could easily envision this kid having the confidence, as twisted as it is, to take a fortune teller out of her tent and throughout the park, disrupting the natural capitalist order. As opposed to this time where he's thinking about, being keeper of the castle. Like, it's not completely unbelievable, but I believe the other one a little more. I don't think this is a bad song. I do think this is a solid song. Probably steering a hint towards album track territory, though, if I'm being honest. The vocals, once again, are kind of buried. The riff is good, but doesn't really elevate itself to anything super noticeable. But is there anything really bad about this song? No, I'm mostly nitpicking, so Nosferatu Man, solid.
So, for me, like, a couple things I want to comment on. One, I'm going to say, from my research and, like, from what I was able to take away from Nosferatu Man on the lyrical sense, like, the lyrics are heavily inspired by the film Nosferatu. Not the one that came out, like, like a year or two ago. Because, like, ladies and gentlemen, again, this record was released in 1991, so time. But it was actually, like, the film in question was the original 1922 film, the classic German expressionist and horror film that was an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's 1897 novel Dracula. For those of you who want to know a little bit more about that movie, well, one, I heavily encourage anybody who's like, remotely curious and is a decent horror fan to check it out. It's a fun movie. You can probably find it on YouTube pretty quickly. And two, like, it just, do yourself a favor, educate yourself, do a quick Google, learn about, like, movie history. It's kind of fun. But outside of movie history and how Nosferatu inspired the lyrics here, for me, because of that, I mean, I do appreciate the lyrics as a whole, because, like, they clearly paint the picture of, like, what, basically a guy who's, like a person or an entity that's hot and cold with a significant other, and ultimately ends up, like, killing that significant other at the end of the track. I mean, like, at the end of the track, you get the lyrics, "Now my queen is lying in her early grave. After that girl, I'll keep alone. There's nothing left to save." So, like, the girl's dead at the end of the whole track. But if I had to be honest with you, like, there's nothing really deep or substantial here. Like, again, the lyrics are pretty much surface level. They do a good job, like, with the imagery and, like, the kind of feelings that you can get from them, but nothing compared to, like, Breadcrumb Trail, where I'm like, well, I can take, like, little nuggets here or there and, like, kind of dive into a deeper meaning. So there's that. The guitar riff that you were mentioning, I think it's a highlight for me on the whole track here, because it's so piercing at certain points that it bleeds on the edge of, like, of, like, if you don't like the sound of that guitar riff within the first 30 seconds of the song, this will be easily your least favorite track off the whole record, because that feeling, that noise that's like, copied and pasted throughout the whole track, like it's very prominent. It could easily sink a track's appeal. But for me, I absolutely loved it. Like, considering the themes of like horror and like dread and everything like that, it plays well within the song's structure. Outside of the guitar in the lyrics, like, the other things I liked about the track is that you get the hypnotic groove that the band locks into about halfway through the song, but like it almost seems like when they lock into that groove, it gets interrupted, and they lock into that groove again, and then it gets interrupted again. I love that. Like, for those of you who are super fans of the show, and Matt, I mean, as being a co-host here, you are probably the most super fan here that isn't myself, because we're equal super fans of the show because we experience it on a week in, week out basis. But you will know that a musical kink of mine is when a track stops and starts, and I absolutely loved that moment there. It was disorienting, and I liked it. And yeah, outside of that, I mean, the track as a whole is a decent track. I think the reasons why this track here isn't a top track for me is that, again, lyrics are pretty surface level. Like, again, they do a good job painting an image, but there is more for me to digest with my other favorite tracks off the record. But I'm a fan of Nosferatu Man.
Yeah, again, it's a solid track for me. Like, I did not hate it. Like, it very much just, I was able to get what it means, and I do appreciate there being a place for songs like this where, again, a guy feels like, I mean, there is a fine line between, writing from a metaphorical perspective and basically just writing a fan fiction. And there could be an argument that that's exactly what this is. Like, hey, I just saw Nosferatu. I like that movie. I think that movie could be my life. Here's what I think about it. And you know what? I'm cool with that. I'm cool with songs that kind of nerd out like that, although maybe not the case here. It could just very well be talk on dealing with feeling like a monster or whatever the case may be. But again, like you said, the lyrics are a bit surface level, and I would say the music is at least tonally a bit more surface level. But again, I don't hate this track. It's a solid track. And and I'll also say that the sung parts of this song, the parts where it's not spoken word, do sound like the closest thing we've yet to anything resembling mainstream music on this album. Not that that's what they were going for, but I definitely heard stuff like, oh yeah, I could see this being stuck onto the radio at like 2 a.m. But that's my final thought on Nosferatu Man, and we are down to 4 tracks already, and Ryan has yet to reveal his top 3, and I will be shocked if they aren't exactly the ones I'm thinking of, but I will let Ryan be the decipherer of that, because it is time to move on to the next track, which is Don Aman.
Oh man, Don Aman, man, what this song? Just wow, dude! Like, talk about like spoken word and its utilization throughout the record here. Like, this song here is just so good. Like, for the most part of this song, it's just essentially like spoken word and just guitar strumming. Like, you get the change ups here and there, but the atmosphere that's absolutely created in this track here is just absolutely great. Like it's not a one-for-one comparison, but I got the sense of like, maybe loneliness and like, the coldness from this track. I compared it to like, at least in feeling, to In the Cold Cold Night by the White Stripes. For those of you who are interested in hearing our thoughts about that track, we did Elephant. We reviewed that album some time ago, and just scroll back, find it, treat yourself to that after this episode, of course. But yeah, just the absolute, like, coldness and the absolute, like, loneliness of this track here is absolutely great. And, like, this track as a whole, it's basically trying to encapsulate the feeling of being at a party and having social anxiety, and it captures it to a T. Like, like the first set of lyrics are detailing like this character stepping outside and wishing he was drunk, and he was just like a lot of internal thoughts. And like you get the lyrics like he really should forget about it, and he decided to piss, but he couldn't. Like those like dumb thoughts that like somebody thinks, but you can really just like really be in like this person's brain. Like you get also the narrative, the descriptive lyrics of like a plane passing silently overhead, streetlights and the buds on the trees, and the night was still. And then he finally gets the courage to come back into the party, step back inside, and then you get the anxiety feeling of like being at the party, and like the set of lyrics that I absolutely loved was found towards the end. Well, yeah, I would say found towards the end, like swimming underwater in the darkness, like walking through an empty house, speaking to an imaginary audience, and being watched from outside by someone. Like again, Brian McMahon and his lyric writing here is absolutely top notch, especially the metaphor of like swimming underwater in the darkness. Like that absolutely caught that stuck with me a good bit. It's just so good. And then later on in the track, like towards the end, you get the ending stanza being Dan woke up, looked at the night before, and he knew what he had to do. He was responsible. In the mirror, he saw his friend. Now, a lot of people can kind of take that last little section and go like a couple different ways. Like, I'm just going to split it into two different ways. Like, one, focusing on the sentiment of like he saw his friend. Like, maybe Don was like, trying to change his life and like saying, hey, like, I owe it to myself and I need to change like some aspects about myself. Or, I hate to say it, the other end, the other discussion about it is Don, saw in the mirror, he was responsible for his life, and he was maybe considering like going down a much darker road. But yeah, I love the kind of mystery in that. I'm of the belief that Don, seeing his friend, made a promise to himself to change his life and take charge of his mental health. With that kind of mentality, that might be a little contradictory considering what the next track is, but when we get to that next track, we will. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, like, instrumentally, like, there's not really much here to discuss. The guitar does a really good job just painting the backdrop of the song so effectively on a sonic level. You do get the random shifts throughout the song that do a good job breaking up the separate little sections, but nothing like, as grand as like Breadcrumb Trail. But yeah, dude, this song is absolutely a great song for me. And I think you might have guessed what my top three are going to be, but this song here did land in my top three at number 3.
Number 3. Oh wow. Oh wow. I wasn't predicting which song was gonna be your 1, 2, or 3, but all I know is based on what you just said about Don Aman, that this is your number 3. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts on numbers 1 and 2 are gonna be, because that was a glowing review, and for good reason too. I'll start by mentioning your talk about the guitar. I think the guitar is fantastic on this song. It's doing the Lord's work of the musicality on the song, especially considering it's, like you say, a completely spoken word track for the most part. I said it could be doing the Dark Lord's work, but it's doing the Lord's work nonetheless. Those opening lyrics that you talked about this guy just waking up, thinking to himself, what kind of day it was, and then realizing he was trying to take a piss and then he couldn't. Like, I wrote down that those lyrics felt very strange and also somewhat relatable. And then it just kind of goes on to this story about, what he's been going through and the vibes that he's feeling. Kind of almost similar, just thinking about it out loud, to something that you would see on a darker episode of BoJack Horseman, where the titular character just decides to go on a bender and may end up, crashing his car into a pool or driving out to Ohio for some unspecific reason that I won't spoil for you. And just finding himself just dealing with all this chaos and all these feelings of wanting to, just let loose and just go crazy before you get to those final lines, which a lot of people, like you say, interpret it could go down a darker path, but could be in a lighter path of him realizing that he is the man in the mirror and he's got to own up to the responsibility of all the actions that he did. Maybe the friend is him and the friend is who he wants to try to please, and that person currently is not him. So I did like the lyrics in that regard. Again, the only real complaint I have is the mix, because again, the vocals seem very low, especially for as whispered as they are. Like on Breadcrumb Trail, that felt a bit more spoken. Same goes with Nosferatu Man. Here they seem to be like whispery, and I would say intentionally so. Like they're trying to sort of mimic this idea of that this is an internal monologue, or at least, someone talking about another person to the point where they don't hear what you're saying about them, which, granted, isn't as noble as I made it sound to me, but facts are facts. But in either case, I wish they would have been bumped up a little higher. But I still think this is a really, really good track, and it just missed being in my top 3. So, Don Aman, very, very good track.
So, what you're saying is there's a very good chance, we're going to share some top tracks here coming up relatively soon.
I would say it is scientifically impossible that we don't. I would say that there is a... for those of you filling out your scorecards, you may notice that both me and Ryan each have 2 tracks left in our top 3. There are 3 tracks left. And if you can't do the math, then I apologize for, sorry.
But, yeah, I'm glad that you did appreciate Don Aman quite, a good deal. I feel like, again, the vocal mixing, for me, it works well given the context of the song, where, you're really just sunk into a guy's brain. Granted, again, I'm just gonna say, the way I listened to this record primarily, first, was, I was literally sitting on the porch with my earbuds, looking at the lyric sheet, so, I was really, digesting, I was really just sitting with the record, so, but, henceforth, afterward, I did do, a couple different, ways of listening to it, I listened to it in my car, listened to it at work, so yeah, I kind of, experimented with it, but yeah, needless to say, I'm glad that you did appreciate Don Aman, and, overall, though, I'm glad that neither of us have a bottom track here, considering, the songs are pretty, they're not everyone's cup of tea, and, this isn't really your style of music. One, you probably could have found that out with the opening moments of Breadcrumb Trail, but 2, if you're at this point in the record, you definitely know what you're in for. But before we dive into the rest of the LP, with the next track here being Washer, Matthew, I have a question for you.
It would be weird if you had a question for anybody else, but go on. What is that question?
If the dear listener out there is really appreciating the fact that, one, we're delivering a quality episode here with Spiderland by Slint in our dissection of that album, but also appreciating the fact that we could jump from Motown to this within the span of 2 review, within the span of a review. and they want to help continue to support and help encourage us to keep on keeping on what we do on a week in, week out basis. What are some ways that they can help do that?
Well, one of the ways they can help us do that is by following us on our social medias. If you're looking for us, we are on Facebook, we are on Threads, we are on Blue Sky, we are on Instagram. We have the username ttheylisten, that is ttheylisten, and that is where we post our episodes, whether they come from a different variety of sources. And speaking of those sources, that's where you can listen to us, is on those sources, whether it be podcasting platforms like Apple Music or Spotify or Pocket Cast, or we have a YouTube page. We'd like to listen to our episodes as we upload them there every week. And wherever you're at, whether it be on a podcasting platform or on YouTube, if you like what you hear, give us a like. If you're on YouTube, give us a comment, subscribe to our channel, and also, do as Ryan says and please the algorithmic gods in order that they continue to share our stuff. Because as we've talked about, we've covered so many different things. We've covered Motown, we've covered Neil Young, we've covered Black Country New Road, we're covering this, we've covered Joy Division. So we've covered a bunch of different artists, and that doesn't even cover the surface level of the surface level when it comes to our content. So if you're curious as to some of the stuff we've covered, you can go on any of those platforms, check out the episodes that we've done. We're approaching that big milestone number soon, of the big 100. But if you go to any of those platforms and give us a listen, share it to your socials, that would be grandly appreciated. Also, if you want to reach out to us directly, but you do not know us directly, we do have an email, which is ttheylisten@gmail.com. Again, that is ttheylisten@gmail.com. Whether you have some criticisms or some praise, or perhaps a suggestion for a future episode, because we have done listener requests before and we are very much willing to do them again, granted that they are not absolutely ridiculous like Morgan Wallen or Bach's Fifth Symphony, whatever the case may be. And for the record, if Bach doesn't have a Fifth Symphony, don't come at me, I don't know what I'm talking about. The point being that if you like what you're hearing, share with a friend, share with someone you think might like the music we're talking about. And for those who have done that so far, thank you, because it helps me and Ryan do what we do on a week in, week out basis, talking about this. We're not sponsored by anybody. We're not part of some major podcast network. We're just two guys who love to talk about music and love sharing it with you. And any gratitude you give back to us is greatly appreciated.
And I'm right there with you, with my gratitude and my appreciation. And, dear listener, at the very least, maybe consider our show here as a way to break away from, your Spotify algorithm and, being force-fed, hey, you should listen to the new Sabrina Carpenter album, or hey, you should listen to the latest Drake album, or just, a way to break out of your ecosphere, because, for me, prime example, last week, I broke out of my my ecosphere, my music usual lane, and I listened to Motown, and I was incredibly grateful for that. And Matt chose a quality record for us to dive into, and while both of us have never really dove into Slint here, but there's countless amount of other examples of us breaking out of our own musical shells, and I mean that's the beautiful thing about what this show is. We dive into records that are curated, and how we each recommend us dive into an album week in, week out. But yeah, I'm absolutely happy with the journey that we've taken so far here, my good sir.
Agreed wholeheartedly. And you mentioned an album in there that we may end up reviewing soon. I have not listened to it yet, and I am somewhat mentally preparing myself for it, but we will cross that bridge when we get there. For right now, we are on the bridge in Louisville, Kentucky that belongs to Slint. We're talking about Spiderland, and if you're ready, Ryan, I'm going to go ahead and kick off the back half of this album with track 4 of 6, which is Washer.
I'm absolutely ready, man. And I'm also like mentally preparing for the fact that next week we might be talking about Sabrina Carpenter. But, you know, if that's the case, we will journey into that record together. So,
well, we definitely will because I have not heard it yet, but again, we'll cross that bridge if and when we get there. So, Washer, this song, I really like this song for a major reason, is that, for starters, you have an intro that is very guitar-driven and very rhythmically driven. It very much feels like a prog rock intro in spirit. Like, obviously, it doesn't have, like, the careening keyboards of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, or the fancy bass of a Yes, or, you know, the mysticism of a Styx, or whatever you want to consider. But that's kind of what I like about it. Like, nothing against those bands and the things that they do, but here you have a very progressive, intricate sound that also doesn't feel very schlocky or steroided up with anything. It's just basically guitar, drums, bass, and vocal. And that's about as pure rock as you can get. Yet they've come up with this arrangement that's so intricate and so executed well. It's well executed. And it just sounds really, really good. And throughout the entire track, the band is just dead on in sync with each other. Like, most bands trying to perform this kind of stuff would probably fall flat on their face. And that's what makes a record like this special, because you can, at the very least, depending on your consideration of this kind of music, look at that and say, you know what? I may not be able to do what they're doing. A lot of people may not be able to do what they're doing, but they did it. They put it on record, and it sounds great. So that is a very strong element to this track. Another one is the lyrics, which to me feel like a bit of a breaking point, and I'll let you go into more of the details of the lyrics and of themselves. But much like we talked about 2 weeks ago with Closer, it just feels it feels like the point where, if you're looking at the tracks through a narratival sequence, like, you know, it's a story that starts with Breadcrumb Trail that leads into Nosferatu Man that leads into Aman, which might be a bit of a stretch, but if you are going that route, this feels like the point in the story where whatever pressures that the narrator or the protagonist is feeling inside are starting to bubble up to the point of peak conflict. And what it creates are a set of words and lyrics that's about as dark and depressing as anything on that album. This track is dark. And it does not hold back in its feelings. And honestly, the sound matches it. Like, for as intricate as it is, it definitely carries a dark undertone. Like, a lot of times when you hear particularly like prog rock or post rock or math rock, so much of the focus is directed towards making sure you play the damn notes right that it kind of loses any spiritual feeling. Like, it doesn't feel like you're listening to anything except, you know, a classical piece or a very written out piece being performed for the sake of performance. And again, nothing wrong with that, but these guys take it to that next echelon of, hey, not only are you supposed to appreciate the level of intricacy that's in our music, but also you're supposed to feel sad, because this is a sad song. And it's not easy to pull that off. So I commend these guys for doing that. Like I said, I'll let you dive into lyrics a little bit more, but I said my piece on Washer, except for this piece. It is in my top 3 at number 3.
So, yeah. I'm going to start with the lyrical analysis here, because just a couple of lyrical moments that I do want to highlight. Like you alluded to, this is a very dark song. And, ladies and gentlemen, like we talked about with Closer by Joy Division a couple weeks ago, if you're feeling any of these feelings that resemble anything coming from the song, countless amount of resources. Best resource you can do is pick up the phone, reach out to somebody. If you literally have nobody to reach out to, dial 988 and get connected with somebody right away. They'll be able to talk you through everything that can help you in your life. That being said, the lyrics here and the way everything's being sung is absolutely breathtaking, dude. Like, I'm gonna just highlight a couple sections here. Towards the end, you get the lyrics, "Don't let this desperate moonlight leave me with your empty pillow. Promise me the sun will rise again." Dude. Dude, like, at this point, like, this person does have, like, you know, has like, some hope that life could change. But, like, the concept of "don't let this desperate moonlight leave me," the sun will rise again, it's absolutely fucking poetic. And, like, talk about being fucking poetic. Like, the lyrics, another section that, really, just got my attention is, like, towards the beginning where you get the lyrics, "Fill your pockets with the dust and the memories that rises from the shoes of my feet." Like, not as, like, you know, transparent as, like, the other set of lyrics that I highlighted, but, like, you know, fill your pockets. Pockets are supposed to be a safe place, secure place on your body with the dust. Dust is basically, like, you know, just, you know, old stuff that's basically kind of, like, you know, not really useful. And the memories, like, that rises from the shoes on my feet. Shoes on the person's feet as they're moving out. They're collecting the memories and the dust that's filling into the pockets. Like, again, I'm probably not doing that set of lyrics proper analysis in terms of justice, but again, that's pretty deep stuff. And again, it cannot be overstated how well Brian McMahon is absolutely delivering a performance here that is absolutely captivating. Now, keep in mind, like, you know, prior to this, the recording of this LP, Brian was in a pretty dark space. Like, he was in that car accident that nearly killed him, and he was pretty depressed. And like I kind of hinted at with the intro here with talking about Slint, the group wasn't really all that successful, like, when they were recording and releasing stuff. So he was in a really dark place, and, like, this, it's pretty evident here with the way that he was able to, like, really sell and deliver this song here to almost, like, perfection. Like, it's just so good. I cannot say enough good things about his delivery. And outside of that, like, the only other thing I'm just going to say about the song as a whole, before getting into the instrumentation, which I'll briefly touch on. Well, I guess I'll go into the instrumentation first, and then go into, like, my overall thoughts about the song as a whole. I do like the haunted guitar line that you alluded to. It grounds this whole song at several spots. I thought that was a very effective, like, you know, use of the guitar. And also, like, the drums and bass, like, I really haven't given them enough credit throughout the whole record here so far, but here specifically, I noted that they were doing a good job creating a somewhat sludgy backdrop, and considering, like, how dark this song is, for them creating, like, a sludginess of a backdrop, like, that's a pretty effective use of instrumentation as a whole. And the moment towards the end where things seem like they're about to kick up, and the guys really seem like they're gonna, like, you know, really rip into the track, that's when the guts are ripped out, and you get the lyrics that I at the very end where he's talking about, "I too am tired now, embracing thoughts of tonight's dreamless sleep. My head is empty, my toes are warm, I'm safe from harm." Like, again, straight poetry from Brian McMahon. Like, my God. And, like, just the overall, like, you know, beauty about this track here. While, yes, Brian was going through a dark space at the time, the amazing thing about music as a whole is it has the ability to break down barriers between, you know, the musician and the listener, and it allows the listener to process feelings and basically give them the feeling that they're not alone. So, I mean, yes, this is a very dark track, but if someone's going through a rough spot in their life, they can possibly hear this track and realize, hey, I'm not the only one who's ever felt this way. Yes, life is going to be a little hard, but I can get through this. Like, I absolutely love sentiments like that, and I'm always a huge fan of like mutual exorcisms of like the artist demons and the listeners demons. I've talked about that within several songs throughout our whole project here. But yeah, that's enough about Wash here. The only other detail I gotta tell you about it is, well, at this point you probably figured it landed in my top 3. It is my second favorite track off the whole record.
So I anticipate what you're going to say about number 1, because this review for number 2 was even more glowing and just gushing praise compared to even Don Aman for it. But I'm right there with you. This track rules, because again, not only is it a track that can make the listener feel like you say that there is space in the darkness for two people to share, and you're not going to be alone even in your darkest moments. Like, I do love that too. But again, musically, it's just so good. Like, again, it handles intricate subject matter with an intricate rhythm and just nails it. Like, it just sounds so good. So I'm glad this is in your top 3 too, because it deserves to be in anybody's top 3 if they're listening to this band or this project as a whole. So if you are inclined, I'd say it's time that we move on to the penultimate track off this record, which is For Dinner ...
So, yeah, For Dinner. The only pure instrumental track off the whole record. And it's a pretty cool track, honestly. I really don't have much to say about it as a whole as compared to compared to the rest of the tracks. And that's not to take away from it. Like, I do love the instrumental palette heal. There's several moments where you get the rising and sinking feelings that are used throughout the whole track. And the guitar tone as a whole is just so menacing. And I love how that menacing tone is used to build up the song throughout several aspects. And the only other note, dude, I have to say about For Dinner here is that the band really plays with dynamics very well here, but not in the sense of loud soft, loud soft, loud soft. The band really does execute the tension and release dynamic pretty effectively. But yeah, I hate to really give such a brief review of For Dinner as a whole, but yeah, it's a cool song. I do dig what it's bringing to the table, but there's not really a whole lot of meat on the bone here for a track that's called For Dinner. That's a little ironic for me.
Yeah, that is a good point. That is a little ironic that but then again, they could be going for just a nice simple salad for dinner, maybe with a little bit of bacon bits on it. Whatever. I'm not their dietitian. So my thoughts on For Dinner, I don't have a whole lot either. I will say this is the song that came closest to being a bottom track for me, but what you described about that tension and release with the dynamics saved it from that category, because for the first minute or so, I was kind of irritated because I was thinking, okay, it sounds like they're starting to warm up for something. But they're, the drummer's just sort of canoodling and the guitars are sort of canoodling. It sounds like they're warming up on track and releasing it as a track. But once it hits that rise about a minute or so in, everything makes sense. Like, the intro was just sort of a tense little time bomb before the release of the, for lack of a better term, chorus of the song. It's an instrumental, so it doesn't really have a chorus, but it does have that release that sticks out and creates a nice contrast with the opening. Because otherwise, if that's all that was, I probably would have easily considered this a bottom track and felt nothing, because I'm not a fan of songs where a band just sort of pisses around and releases that as a quote unquote instrumental. A fine example of that is the penultimate track off of The Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson, where Moonchild just sort of canoodles and pisses around for 8 minutes and goes nowhere. So that almost reminded me of this, but again, once the band got into a full set and full power, it all made sense. Not in my top three either, but it's a good solid instrumental. I liked it.
Yeah. I think for the most part, I'm right there with you. I almost wanted to mark this as an instrumental interlude, but like I guess like for an interlude, one would have to be properly labeled as an interlude, and two would have to be like a minute and a half long. Like this song is like much longer than that. So and there's enough on there. Like I can't like in good consciousness label it as an interlude, but I would say out of the whole record, I know we're only talking about 6 tracks here, but For Dinner is definitely like if I had to label a track as an album track, this is gonna be easily the one that I would label as an album track.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you because this, in almost every sense of the word, is an album track. It is a track on the album featuring the band Slint, and saying, here is what the band sounds like. It is a track off this album. Mission complete. So yeah, I don't hate it. It sounds fine. It sounds like the band. And with that in tow, I am ready to finish things off with the final track, which for those of you keeping score, you know how we're going to feel about this, which is Good Morning Captain. Ryan, if you are ready.
I am ready, man. Go right ahead. Talk to me about this track, Good Morning Captain, and like why is it so good?
Well, for one thing, the vocal delivery once again stands out as a highlight of this track. Because not only does the delivery flow between spoken word and song, but also the vocals are produced a little better on this track. I noticed that immediately. Well, maybe not immediately. I think it was on the second listen through. But the second listen through, the first time I noticed it, it was like, bam. It was just, it felt like everything was elevated and more clear. But again, the vocal performance is solid. And the dissonant guitar drives the mood of the song so hard. Like, it just drives this sort of crashing towards the end. Like, I was reminded a lot of the transition parts of Black Country New Road's magnum opus of a song called Sunglasses, where you have these moments where everything just sort of like crashes together, and it sounds like a breaking point. It sounds like you're going to have to take a road one way or another, or at the very least, it is the aural equivalent of overstimulation, which I appreciate in this art form. And once again, you have this tale that talks about this ship that, you know, sort of like a darker version of Sloop John B, where it's just like, you know, I'm on this ship and I don't know where it's going. But when it climaxes at the end, when McMahon just whispers, I miss you, and you just get that bam, that smash of wailing lead guitar with the drums and the bass. It's easily one of the highlights on this album for me, because he's realizing in this moment that whoever this person that he's missing, whether it's the man in the mirror from Don Aman or the person that he was with from the fortune teller tent on Breadcrumb Trail, he realizes that he's missing something, and that something is someone, or vice versa. So it's just a powerful climax to this story or set of stories throughout this album, and it just works so well. And what makes it even better is the fact that you have this sort of exhausted whisper of a vocal that clashes with these raw angry guitars, and it just creates this again, this tension, this exhaustion, this throw everything at the wall and I don't care if it sticks mentality that just comes across so vividly. Yeah, I like this track a lot, and I have it completing my top 3 at number 2, knowing full well you are about to make my review of it look like a first grade first draft essay.
No. That's perfectly fine, man. And like overall, like I'll start with the I guess the thing I was most curious to hear about with your review of Good Morning Captain, which was the vocal mixing and the vocal recordings, because like one thing I did highlight about it is the fact that the way that the vocals here are how they're recorded. It's so good, dude. Like and like the reason why I had concerns about like your perspective of it is just like you get the intense sections and like the intense, like, you know, more like I don't want to say like screamy sections, but like more pronounced sections. But you also get the sections where like you get the lyrics like where he's saying like, "Let me in. I'm the only one left. The storm took them all." Like the more of the dialogue sections, and those are purposefully recorded in a sense where they sound like they're coming from somewhere else. And for those of you who are listening to this record on earbuds or headphones, like you can hear the stereo effect on it, and it is absolutely executed so fucking well. Like when a producer in a band's able to, like, you know, use studio trickery like that, or like you're just able to utilize studio mechanics to amplify the experience of a song like that, it is absolutely a delight in my book. So I'm glad that you did make a point saying like the vocals here were recorded very well compared to the rest of the album here. So that makes me pretty happy. One other thing I'm gonna like the one thing though I will dive a little bit deeper into is the lyrical analysis, where, like, for me, this song here is about an adult coming to terms with how life has transpired and how rough has life treated them, and then eventually, like, that person that they're missing at the end is their younger self, and they're looking at themselves, their younger self, right in the eye and right at the end, or towards the end of the track, and they're trying to find their way home, and like they're making this promise that they're going to make it up to that younger self. And you think about, like, you know, when you're younger and how you have this grand vision of how your life's going to turn out. You're like, hey, you know, I'm going to be smart. I'm going to make something out of myself. I'm going to have, like, all this money. I'm going to have this job. And then life hits you right in the face. And you're not who you thought you were going to be when you were much younger. And it's absolutely a horrifying thought about, like, confronting your younger self and having a dialogue with that. And, like, the concept of, like, making it up to your younger self, like, oh my god, like, that concept alone, my dude, absolutely blew my brain wide open. And scrolling back here, though, like, the way that the track sets the scene with this imagery of like this captain saying, "Let me in," and "I'm the only one left. The storm took them all." Like, you can really just picture someone asking to be let in, whether it's like at a tavern or an old house, and like there's this big storm, and like the ship has crashed, and the ship is a metaphor for like life and like how life has treated them. And I absolutely loved that, and just the dialogue again between the captain and the boy, his younger self, is an absolutely breathtaking moment in the track in the whole album. It's just so good. Outside of those moments, I absolutely agree with you. Like that moment that you highlighted where it very much sounds like Black Country New Road. That section rules. I instantly highlighted that. I'm like, yeah, I could see where they drew the inspiration from. It's pretty much like on the sleeve of that song from Black Country New Road. And outside of those moments, like the guitar is doing a great job with the menacing line that it's playing throughout the whole track. It kind of reminds me of a horror film, and I found myself thinking about that throughout several spots throughout this album. Like, there's several moments where it really genuinely reminds me of like a horror film, and I'm a fan of that. It's so good. And the bass here, I found myself loving what the bass player was doing with the its line throughout the whole track, and the drums are doing a great job complementing what the bass is laying down. And outside of that, like, just the way that the track ends, like you talked about, with how you get the climax of the captain saying "I miss you," and you get the absolute crash out the end, is absolutely so good. Like, dude, like, I'm glad that if this song would have been like the opening track off the whole record, I still probably would have, like, you know, loved it just as much. But I'm glad that we're ending off the track in such a fashion with my appreciation of it. And obviously, I mean, for those of you who are listening to this episode at home or wherever you're listening to this episode at this moment, you probably figured it out, one, through your "Hey, listen to this" scorecards, but two, with the absolute gushing review that I laid about this track here, that, yeah, Good Morning Captain is my favorite track off the whole record.
And it is a great one to end on because, like you say, it's one thing to deal with the pain of the now, as we talked about a couple weeks ago with Joy Division, as we've talked about on several other albums we've discussed. But you're right, that idea of confronting yourself, your younger self, with who you are now and realizing there's such a grand difference and perhaps a feeling of lost opportunity and lost vision sort of going by the wayside, that is terrifying, that is haunting, but they execute it damn near perfectly on this track. Like, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, the execution was perfect, and you know, I'm gonna be honest with you. Our review, while it may not have been as perfect as this album was executed, specifically with that last track, I would say it was executed pretty good, if not solid to awesome, whatever descriptor or positive reinforcements that you want to lay at us here. But needless to say, my good sir, we had 6 tracks up, 6 tracks down, all of our scorecards filled out, so there's only one thing left to say about this review.
We did it.
We indeed did it. We ventured into Spiderland right at the start of, like, spooky season, man. So, like, that was appropriately timed. I appreciate that, man.
That is a nice transition, man. You just, you know, I guess the vibes within you were just like, you just got that first whiff of pumpkin spice latte, and you're like, that's it, spiders. We're talking about spiders.
Oh, man. So, I'm going to go first with my overall thoughts and rating on this album here. And so, for me, this album here absolutely took me by surprise. Like I said at the beginning of this review here, I was expecting more traditional post-rock, like Godspeed You Black Emperor, Sigur Rós, Explosions in the Sky. What I got was a precursor to one of my favorite bands of all time in La Dispute, and another band that I have a lot of admiration for in that Black Country New Road. The tracks Um, while they're only like the track count is short, like you only get 6 songs here, but it's not labeled as an EP. And you know what? I feel like that's fair because a lot of the tracks are a little bit longer compared to like a traditional EP. But yeah, there's only one track here where I would consider it to be an album track, and obviously we talked about that, which is For Dinner. But the other tracks here, like, I would say, honestly, off the top of my head, like the only other like albumy track that I could possibly give that distinction to was Nosferatu Man. But that track I had a lot of fun diving into, and there was a lot of meat on the bone for me to like digest and really enjoy what the band was bringing to the table. And like as you get progressively up the chain with my appreciation about like specific tracks of the record, like Breadcrumb Trail, Aman, Washer, and then like the climax here with Good Morning Captain. Like there's a lot of a lot of different moments throughout the LP where the band's able to really encapsulate a sound and a feeling that is completely new for me. And just like again, like my gushingness over like the top 3 tracks, at least from my perspective in this review, they stand as they stand, and like the whole concept of like what was brought to the table of Good Morning Captain, it's gonna probably haunt me for like a couple years to come. I'm gonna be honest with you. So with all that in mind, in all good consciousness, like I'm very tempted to give this album a perfect rating, but I can't do that because of For Dinner and how album tracky it is. Like it's fine in its own in its own sense, but it's not bringing the fire, or not bringing enough fire to bring this album to completion with a complete 10 out of 10. But I'm just gonna give it the next rating down, which for me is gonna be a solid 9.5 out of 10.
And for me, I had to think hard about this one because, full disclosure, I drink beer. And I've been drinking beer for a few years now. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm not the typical, like, grab a Bud or grab, like, your typical man beer that you see all the commercials about on TV. No, I tend to dabble in different types of beers. And the reason I bring that up is because listening to this album reminded me of like my first few times, and most of my times drinking India Pale Ales, or IPAs as they're known, which is that they're not ultimately the thing I'm going to reach for at the end of every day and say, this is what I seek comfort in. But I can drink it, and I can say, you know what? I noticed this. I noticed that. I like that. I like this. And sometimes they're amazing. Sometimes they're not so great. But a lot of times they are very good. And that's how I feel about this album. This album is not necessarily a album I would seek out just for its sonic palette, because there are elements of it, whether it be the low vocals or the low mixed vocals at least, and sort of the dark brooding nature of this record, that I wouldn't go out to it time and time over again like I would with some 10 out of 10 albums. But I can appreciate what this is. And what this is to me is post-rock, prog rock, alternative rock, indie rock done right. Like, it takes a notion of basic band structure, gets intricate with it, and somehow manages to tell these deep, dark tales of feeling hurt, feeling confused, feeling lonely, having these vivid imaginations of captainships and midway carnivals and dudes who can't take a pee. Like, all of that just wrapped up into this mindset and this sonic palette that, while it doesn't, again, stray from that musical structure of guitar, vocal, bass, and drummer, has so many different layers to it, just in texture and execution and everything else. So I also am not going to give this a 10 out of 10 because the enjoyability of it does tend to falter in certain areas, but I appreciate it for what this is. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10.
So, I gave it a 9.5 out of 10. You gave it an 8.5 out of 10. So, that makes the math, while not as easy as it's been in a couple of our past reviews here, to be honest with you, for one reason or another, but it makes the math pretty easy, though, in that it averages our scores out to be a solid 9 out of 10, because
Math
works for everyone. Despite some people's objections to numbers, they're just numbers. They don't discriminate, they don't hate, they just exist. So, for me, my next album recommendation, I'm gonna recommend a album from one of my favorite groups of all time. And that group is La Dispute. And the album out of their discography that I'm going to recommend is going to be the one that I can really kind of pinpoint as the most Slint-like in terms of like balancing the spoken word missy of the music with the more distorted and like chaotic musical elements that were found in Spiderland. And the album that I'm going to officially recommend out of La Dispute's discography is going to be Rooms of the House. So, yeah, the main reason why I'm recommending Rooms of the House from La Dispute is you get a lot of different flavors that were emulated in the album that we just got done reviewing here. Like, you get For Mayor in Splitsville, Woman in Mirror, Woman Reading, First Reactions After Falling Through Ice, and like, you know, a couple of the other tracks throughout that whole LP. It's a really good LP. So yeah, I'm gonna recommend Rooms of the House by La Dispute if you've enjoyed Spiderland by Slint.
And for me, I was originally going to take the basic route and just recommend For the First Time by Black Country New Road, which you should check out that record and that review if you have not heard us talk about it yet. But instead my pick is going to be another album we've talked about and has a lot of elements of weirdness and imagery and open word thoughts, and basically kind of came to my mind as soon as I read that Steve Albini liked this album by Slint very much, and that is an album produced by Steve Albini that we've talked about, entitled Surfer Rosa by the Pixies. Much like this album, definitely has a bit of a raw, rugged sound to it that I think comes across on record. You get the hush vocals that you hear in tracks like Where Is My Mind and The River Euphrates. So yeah, check that album out if you like this one. And check out our review of that if you'd like to as well.
So, ladies and gentlemen, to summarize the review as a whole and our next album recommendations, our average score of Spiderland by Slint was a solid 9 out of 10. I recommended Rooms of the House by La Dispute. Matthew recommended Surfer Rosa by the Pixies. Check out those records if you've experienced Spiderland by Slint. And also, dear ladies and gentlemen, if you got to this point in this review and you haven't really, prior to listening to our review of this album that we just got done talking about, and you haven't dove into Spiderland by Slint, 1, thank you. 2, what are you waiting for? You could probably literally pause the pod, go check out that album, come back to the pod, and find out where we're gonna go next in next week's review. But yeah, what a review, man! I had a lot of fun diving into this record with you.
I did too. Again, this was a very interesting, very good, very out there record. Like, this is not something like we talk about how 1991 was a year for music and what was made popular then. Uh, this was not considered popular back then. I would probably say it's even less popular now, but definitely for those who are looking into a very solid piece of post rock and super tricky time rhythms with their rock music, this is an album I would definitely recommend.
So we only have one more piece of business to wrap up before we officially crash this review into the sea. Matthew,
Yes, Ryan.
where are we going next week? What do you have on the what do you have on the what do you have on deck for our next review, man?
So, as tempted as I am to talk about the aforementioned new Sabrina Carpenter album, I'm not going to do that. And the reason is I need to break a personal streak of mine. The last two albums that we have done of my selection have both been completely middle of the road 7 out of 10s. Coldplay was a 7 out of 10. Diana Ross and the Supremes, 7 out of 10s. Spoilers for those of you who made it this part of the episode. Go check out those 4 reviews to figure out why we said the things we said. So I personally need to get off the schneid and pick a damn good album. And so with that in mind, Ryan, I'm going to present to you 2 rather big fish. And what's big about these fish is the fact that they both come from the same year, they both have the same number of tracks, and they have both sold over 10 million copies in the United States. So, we're talking about some heavy hitters here. And the way I'm going to make you choose is based off of objects seen on the covers of these 2 albums. Are you ready, sir?
Oh, I am so ready, man. I'm chomping at the bit. What are the 2 choices, my good sir?
So your options for our next album are either a motorcycle or a pack of cigarettes.
Oh, man. I mean, I feel like I have to be true to myself and go with the motorcycle because I don't smoke, and 2, smoking leads to cancer. So, yeah, I'm gonna go motorcycle, my dude.
All right, motorcycle it is. And ladies and gentlemen, the purple one himself has arrived. We are going to be talking about the 1984 soundtrack, I suppose. I have not seen the movie, but it was a soundtrack to a movie. The album that most people realize as it is Purple Rain by the man, the myth, the legend, Prince.
Let's bleeping go! I actually own this record on vinyl too. If you
Oh, really?
If you would believe that, man. Yeah. I actually found it at a garage, not a garage sale, but like I think like Rogers flea market. So yeah. Yeah, I'm absolutely excited to talk about some Prince for our next review, man.
Hell yeah, man. I am too. We are heading off to Minnesota. We are going to be talking about some of the most popular music of the 80s. And hopefully we can come back with a rating higher than 7. I have a strong feeling that we're going to, but we will dive into it next week.
So, one other thing I want to just, talk to you about is, I'm sorry for our, like, the last 2 records that we ended up reviewing that were out of, like, my camp, which was, like, Spiderland by Slint and Joy Division's Closer. I mean, ultimately very depressing records, and, yeah, very esoteric records. I'm glad you enjoyed both, honestly, but I promise you, my friend, when it comes time for next week's review and it's my turn to, put up new records for contention, I'll make it up to you.